Dr. Miller, in your, you've studied so many different sports from both the male and female angle. Is this something that is prevalent still within men's sports, and how does everybody not emulate somebody like Bill Walsh because they see that success and the legacy he's created? Why is there any deviance from that?
It's interesting, well, I think what you said, Sammy Joe, sparks a whole bunch of different thoughts. But before I talk a little bit about Walsh, I used to work with the Los Angeles Rams football team. And we had a fellow, Jack Youngblood, who was an perennial all-pro player and had retired, but was sort of around in a coaching mentorship capacity. And I remember talking with him one day, and he said, look at the great coaches in the league right now. They're all so different. You had Tom Landry at the time was the Dallas coach. Dallas had a very good team, and Landry he gave each one a name. Landry was like the minister. You didn't fool around on that Dallas team. They had certain standards of behavior. He was always extremely composed, wore a fedora on the sidelines. It was just, but he was the minister. And then you had Mike Ditka, who was coaching the Chicago Bears, who were a very good team at that time, a Super Bowl team also. And Ditka, he called the longshoreman, and Ditka would grab a player. Pull him right into, grab his face guard, pull him right up into his face and yell at him. But he was also like Iron Mike. He was this guy they respected because he was just this, and there was nothing that he would ask them to do that he himself wouldn't have done, so to speak. And then there was John Robinson, who was coaching the Rams, a team I was with, and he was like the politician. John was very, very bright, and he would give these talks that were like inspiring. And then there was Bud Grant, who was coaching the Minnesota Vikings, who rarely spoke to his players. One of the quarterbacks I worked with said, I was with the Vikings for 3 years, and he only spoke to me twice. Once he told me to cut my hair, and the other time he gave me my release from the team. He was like the hunter. He was silent, but everything was really well organized. He took those teams to 4 Super Bowls.
Dr. Miller, in your, you've studied so many different sports from both the male and female angle. Is this something that is prevalent still within men's sports, and how does everybody not emulate somebody like Bill Walsh because they see that success and the legacy he's created? Why is there any deviance from that?
It's interesting,
Dr. Miller, I love hearing what you have to say. I've read some books and am very good friends with Jennifer Bottrell, so I've grown up with Dr. Bottrell, and I love sort of this conversation. I've been taking a class at Dartmouth that is through the business school, and so it's a month-long course that's basically 9 to 5 every day. But we just heard yesterday from Sidney Finkelstein. He wrote a book called Super Bosses. And we did a case study on Bill Walsh, which I thought was just fascinating, about him being present at all time, being very meticulous about details, and being very thorough, but in his words, uplifting his athletes and giving his athletes and his coaches the ability to be creative. So he was there, he was hovering at all times, but he changed his language around what failure was and using that to build. And I just found his mentality at the time fascinating because it was so revolutionary within football, and really probably within men's sports in general, I would say. But incredible how many of his coaches that he coached with went on to other professions. And that to me is the real testament of a man's character is, can you uplift others? And one of the attributes that I didn't realize about him was that he would constantly sell his assistant coaches to other franchises. And he would call up franchise presidents and say, this guy deserves a chance to be your head coach. This guy is really great. And so creating a culture around that pursuit of creativity, of excellence, without necessarily the scoreboard at the end. So many of his athletes have gone on to coach at high levels too. And so anyways, that's just more of a comment than a question, but I was curious, Dr. Miller, in your, I mean, you've studied so many different sports, from both the male and female angle. Is this something that is prevalent still within men's sports, and how does everybody not emulate somebody like Bill Walsh, because they see that success and the legacy he's created? Why is there any deviance from that?
It's interesting, you know. Well, I think you. I think a coach has to be true to him or herself. They have to be true to who they are and come from the style that represents their personality. There are certain things, though, like positive eyes and the way they communicate, that I think would make them more effective. It's interesting about Walsh. Walsh was brilliant. I mean, tactically, his approach to the game was really brilliant. And secondarily, he was extremely demanding. He demanded that the quality of practice be, that they perform at an extremely high level in practice. We practice as we play. But on the other hand, there's a story about him when the team came to they were in the Super Bowl one year, and when they came to the hotel, the Super Bowl, Walsh somehow had preceded them there, and he was dressed as the doorman. And he was opening the door to allow the players to come in. So it was a statement, really, that it was about them. It wasn't about him. And I think there's a profound message in that. There's a friend of mine here in the desert with me. He's an older guy. It's funny, his name is Bill Walker, and Bill is, he's 90 years old, and he's now training to set the world record in pole vaulting for 90-year-olds. It gives you some idea of the kind of guy he is. But when he was a high school wrestling coach, he was very effective. He was in the state of Illinois, and he won a lot of state championships. And he said to me something a couple of years ago that I wrote in one of my books, Why Teams Win. He said, when the players get that the coach is more concerned about their success than he is about his or her success as the coach, they will do anything for that coach and for that team. And Walsh, being extremely demanding, also conveyed that it was about them, it wasn't about him. And I mean, the man was quite remarkable. He was a brilliant coach, and he knew how to empathize with his people, and yet at the same time bring out their best. Anyway, I hope that answers some of what you were asking, Sami Jo.
No, that was perfect. Sorry for the interruption. We're homeschooling right now in Ontario. Okay. But I love that. I love the study of, I loved what you said about expressing your own character too within the constraints, which is often forgotten, I think, amongst coaches. We try to emulate others and their success and what made them successful without finding yourself first.
Absolutely. You've got to be who you are. I mean, and I'm always talking to the athletes about love yourself. And the easiest way to love yourself, I tell them, is to take a breath, draw the energy to you, say positive things to yourself. Well, I think when a coach is coming from feeling confident within herself, himself, when players feel that way, everybody performs better.